Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Naruto Shippuden episode review. This one's going to be for episode 461, Hagoromo and Hamura. And yeah, the second part of our kind of Kaguya backstory arc that we're having here. And another really good episode. I'm really actually enjoying this kind of technically filler arc, but I really like what it's adding to the characters. And this is one that really I think has helped things come together a little bit more. Like obviously there's going to be like issues about like it could be more in depth, it could give us more information, but in terms of trying to be just focused on the characters that we have here and not be like crazy focused on exposition, I am enjoying what we get here, and yeah, the one thing I actually didn't mention in the last episode is that we did get a glimpse of a very young Gamamaru, who's obviously otherwise known as a giant Gramps sage, who is the one who has the whole prophecy about the kind of chosen one, Naruto, Nagato whole situation. But he plays a pretty big role in this episode, which I was kind of surprised at, but I also did quite enjoy. Um, there was a part at the start of this episode where I felt like, oh, wow, are we kind of getting a beginning like Avatar: The Last Legend of Korra, beginnings esque kind of origin story for kind of chakra type stuff because ninjutsu, because one of them mentions Hagoromo or Hamura mentions jutsu in this episode, but when they use their powers, it just seems to be a kind of natural thing. Like it's not like they're using like a hand signs and then using like a named technique. Hamura, I think, just shoots some lightning and blows up a boulder or something like that, and he just uses lightning like like he's a Sith Lord or something like that. He doesn't actually use a jutsu, and so when they encounter Gamamaru, and he kind of demonstrates, like the toes, he has the kind of water pistol thing. I'm just kind of like, oh, is that where the Sage of Six Paths, Hagoromo, who eventually becomes the guy who kind of invents ninjutsu kind of thing, is that where he gets the kind of the concept behind the techniques for? Like he sees these kind of more natural animals using certain techniques about a certain element, and then he kind of studies them and manages to kind of put them into practice as a human using ninjutsu. Whereas before, as a member of the Otsutsuki clan having chakra, he could use some techniques but not all. I don't really know if they're going down that path, but it was just a kind of cool connection I had. Just like, oh, that would be cool if they kind of do kind of an avatar type thing like with this, but we're not fully sure just yet. But yeah, a lot of little things in this episode. It's at times this episode was quite kind of slow and just like, okay, we're getting back into the world. Like a couple of years later, we just get that the twins are born. We quickly could have head to them as adults basically, and I was initially very confused in the episode because obviously the Infinite Tsukiyomi is kind of over, of course, and then there's already the humans around, and I'm just like, wait, what happened here? Like, didn't you use the Infinite Tsukiyomi and then basically capture everyone on the world who was a human? And then later on they explain through Gamamaru's dream, his vision basically, that what she did was she revived some of the people from the Infinite Tsukiyomi, kind of erased their memories and kind of put them back in the world, so they wouldn't remember what happened, they wouldn't see her as a villain, but humanity would still continue to exist. And I assume the reason for that is because her ultimate plan is to kind of feed the divine tree so that a new chakra fruit can be grown. And the amount of people that were on the world initially wasn't enough, so she did need humanity to continue to kind of grow so she could continue to have a supply of people to feed the divine tree with, which was part of the kind of emotional core of this episode, seeing that she's basically kept everything about the divine tree secret from her sons, and it's only them kind of getting a little bit of a nudge forward by Gamamaru that kind of forces them to investigate it and find out that she's actually over time considered the leader of this world and is kind of forcing people to become somewhat of sacrifices to the god tree, but they're not aware that it's a sacrifice just yet until later on. And you get that emotional moment where Hagoromo obviously has a kind of budding relationship with this woman called Haori. I think that's how you pronounce her name, Haori. Kind of a hard one to pronounce, but budding relationship, but they weren't a couple, I suppose, just yet. And obviously later on he finds that she has been kind of taken in and is kind of her energy is being kind of sucked out by the divine tree, and I suppose it's the root of her plan to create the white Zetsus that she's about to become one of them. And the death of Hori here, she's confirmed to be dead, is what unlocks Hagoromo's Sharingan, which was another really interesting thing in this episode. Because obviously we know him that he has the Rinnegan, the Sage of Six Paths gets the Rinnegan. So finding out that he gets the Sharingan first, it was just kind of like, wait, what? And how does he get the Rinnegan later? But you see in the trailer for next week's episode that there's a one shot where he does have the Rinnegan, so we're going to see the Sharingan develop into that later. And I think I kind of pieced together some stuff in my mind and figured it out, and that, like, okay, it just seems like a default thing that the Otsutsuki clan has the Byakugan as their kind of basic technique. All of them seem to have the Byakugan. That's just a trait of the Otsutsuki clan. Then, obviously, that means her sons are both born with that technique. They both have the Byakugan initially. But because when she gave birth to them, she had the Rinne Sharingan in her forehead, I suppose the potential for her sons to develop something along the lines of that was born within them. Something that Kaguya herself doesn't have, but she has the Rinne Sharingan. But in terms of her normal eyes turning into Sharingan or Rinnegan, she can't do that, but her sons can. So, this idea that I suppose there's this kind of sort of duality that, like, the Rinnegan is kind of like the Sharingan at its ultimate form, and I suppose what we're going to see is Hagoromo eventually, his Sharingan morph into the Rinnegan, and just, see that be the kind of big technique that allows him to, I suppose, fight on somewhat of an equal level with Kaguya. And then, of course, I suppose the reason why Hamura is considered like the progenitor of like the Hyuga clan is because he doesn't experience a big loss in his life, and so his potential for a Sharingan never activates, and so he just is Byakugan. And I suppose next episode, I suppose towards the end, if it all is going to be resolved in next week's episode in terms of this flashback story, I assume what they're going to have to do is at the same time defeat Kaguya, but also present something about Indra and Ashura, who are obviously Hagoromo's sons, and how they, I suppose, form become like the progenitors for like the other various clans. In that, like with Indra, it's like the start of the Uchiha clan. With Ashura, it's the formation of the Senju clan in addition to the Uzumaki clan, and they're going to have that come together. But yes, here comes a cat. Yes. Thank you, Momo. Sorry about that. So yeah, the other thing there is obviously like, okay, if Hagoromo eventually has sons, who is the mother? If he does get the Rinnegan, that means he has the power of Rinne Rebirth. So he can revive people if he wants to, because in this episode as established, they specifically used the word revive for Kaguya bringing people back. So I assume that perhaps he may revive Hori, because I don't think they'd like just introduce a potential love interest and then just have him kind of move on. But I suppose that they could do that, but it just seems a little bit weird that they've introduced this character and now they're moving kind of past it. But we'll see what happens. I'm kind of wondering, like with Hori, are they in any way going to do something along the lines of that, like she is somehow related to Aino from the last episode, But again, like she was dead before that. But maybe Aino was one of the ones that she did bring back. Like we haven't seen, I suppose, the events of her bringing people back. But I suppose to some extent it would make sense that the person who she kind of wanted to help, the person she cared about, Aino, would be one of the ones she brings back. And so if this is indeed a generation later, Aino having a daughter and that being Hori, would kind of make sense. And so the Sage of Six Paths wife being a descendant of one of the friends of Kaguya would be a really kind of cool little connection to have, at least in my opinion. I don't know if that'll be the truth. But anyway, they definitely made a note of the necklace that she gives to Hagoromo, and maybe that'll be somewhat of importance later on. Off the top of my head, I'm kind of... The symbol is interesting in that it's the same sort of kind of Otsutsuki symbol, the kind of weird kind of comma-shaped thing, but I'm not really sure if there's an obvious connection to it. Maybe I'm just being an idiot here and I'm forgetting something very important, but right now nothing's coming to my head about that. Yeah, the other thing about powers would be that Hagoromo asks Gamamaru to teach him Sage Mode, which is very interesting. I suppose it's not... We don't really see him use it in the same way of like Toad Sage Mode. It's just like he teaches him how to use Sage energy, nature energy type thing. So I suppose this is where the whole Sage of Six Paths comes from. And this is going to be the thing, I suppose, that Kaguya doesn't have that allows him to fight somewhat on her level, having this Sage power and that strength. Plus, this was a slightly different technique in the Sharingan, eventually Rinnegan. I suppose overall, come to the end of the review, I did like how this episode, I suppose, the stuff revealed in this episode, plus some of the other stuff we know about, has really allowed you to kind of piece together a lot of the stuff. Further references to the fact that she is watching out and waiting for like them to come, and she's not telling her sons about it just yet. And obviously this is somewhat of a reference to the Boruto movie and what we found out about some of the other members of the Otsutsuki clan there. But I'll be interested to see, do they really try and hint at anything further with that in like the next episode? Will Kaguya at some stage mention the existence of other Otsutsuki apart from her? But yeah, I assume next week what we're going to see is primarily a fight, and that Hamura, I suppose, is going to be potentially fighting Kaguya here. She reveals her Byakugan is much more powerful than his. He obviously doesn't die here, in that he eventually has children himself, and the Hyuga clan forms from there. So I suppose that the big thing we'll be looking for next episode is there going to be another big, eventful, emotional moment in Hagoromo's life that turns his Sharingan into the Rinnegan? And I suppose if there's going to be any mention of Mangekyo Sharingan or what going on here. Because I now think that sort of needs somewhat of an explanation in the sense of, like, we know that there's somewhat of a connection between the Sharingan and the Rinnegan, but like, why do most of the Uchiha never just randomly develop a Rinnegan, and then how is it that having the Sharingan at its max level combined with some Senju chakra that allows you to get the Rinnegan, but like the Sage of Six Paths starts off with the Sharingan, but like there's some little more explanation still to come, but in general I really liked what we got here. So I think that's it. I'm really excited for next week's episode. The other thing, of course, we're probably going to see is Kaguya merging with the Divine Tree to become the Ten Tails, and just further linking everything together. References to, I suppose, the moon, and stuff like that will start to come into play next time. But yeah, that's been the review. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were on the episode and also the review. But other than that, that has been this video. Thanks for watching, and bye.